Hey, North Dakota, Rob Port here.
And I'm Chad Oban. You're invited to a special live recording of Plain Talk on Wednesday, February 19th at the Peacock Alley in beautiful downtown Bismarck.
We'll be interviewing special guests, reacting to the latest headlines, and answering questions from the audience.
Admission is free, so plan to arrive early to grab a great spot. The reporting kicks off at 6 p.m., and after the show, Rob and I will stick around if for some reason you want to meet us.
That's Wednesday, February 19th at Peacock Alley in Bismarck, starting at 6 p.m.
We'll see you there.
Love staying informed? Subscribe now and get unlimited access to local news, weather, and sports for just 99 cents a month for your first 3 months at inforum.news/join. Read every story, listen to every podcast, and download the apps that keep you informed and on the go 24 hours a day. So head to inforum.news/join right now to subscribe. What are you waiting for? Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month at inforum.news/join.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right? Welcome to Plain Talk. Happy to be with you. And I got to tell you, I got to start off with a little bit of, I guess, what's personal news that's relevant to the interview we're about to have. And I wasn't planning on it being personal news, or I mean, this wasn't a part of the agenda. But you know, not long ago, I wrote a column about a gentleman in Dickinson who's been using the public comment sections of the city of Dickinson's public meetings to engage in anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. I wrote a column about it under the headline that you have a right to free speech. You don't have a right to an audience, because obviously that poses a challenge to these local governments. On one hand, they absolutely want to be open and they absolutely want to get public comment. On the other hand, does everybody at the meeting, people who are there to weigh in on ordinances or taxes or all the other prosaic business that these local governments tackle, do they have to sit through ugly anti-Semitic tirades that really have nothing to do with the city of Dickinson's business? It's a quandary. I wrote about it. Anyway, there was a meeting and the video got cut off. So but what's been related to me is that, apparently he mentioned me by name. Apparently there's an effort online to dox myself, some other members of the media, and put our personal information online. So our first interview today is with Steve Hunegs. He is with the Jewish Community Relations Council of Minnesota and the Dakotas, and we invited him on to talk about comments made by State Representative Nico Rios. He's a Republican from Williston, where Representative Rios went online and posted about, in the context, obviously, President Donald Trump is making some pretty dramatic decisions concerning trade policy with our neighbors in Canada and Mexico. It just so happens that the president of Mexico is of Jewish heritage. And Representative Rios went on X, formerly known as Twitter, and posted wondering if maybe the CIA could overthrow that Jew president in Mexico. And I should actually pull up the X account before, so I could do a direct quote, but I'll introduce our guest, Steve Hunegs. Steve, welcome to the program. Thanks for being on.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Chad. Thank you to Matt for your assistance. It's a real pleasure. As you said, North Dakota, Minnesota, South Dakota are all part of our territory. As I say, 225,000 square miles of paradise. It's my great fortune. And thank you for your courage, Rob, in writing those stories and exposing the gentleman in Dickinson, as well as Representative Rios and his ugly, unfortunate comments.
Yeah, despite what people may be reading online right now, I'm not Jewish. Not that I'm just not. I would be perfectly happy if I was, but I am of Scandinavian Lutheran background, although these days I'm not spiritual at all. But I just, it's remarkable to me. And what Representative Rios actually posted on X, this is a direct quote. He wrote, "When some third world leader wouldn't go along with Clinton, Bush, Obanga," I don't know why he misspelled former President Obama's last name, but he spelled it Obanga. He continues, the CIA would just start a color revolution and overthrow them. Wonder if the CIA would help Trump overthrow and kick this Jew out of power in Mexico. Probably not. Can Doge Elon do this? LMAO. Steve, what was your reaction when you read that?
You nailed it perfectly, Rob, in your column for the forum. But I'll say it's inexcusable, irresponsible, anti-Semitic, as I said before, ugly, and to say the least, unfortunate. There's nothing to elevate public discourse. That's for certain. Completely unnecessary. There's no reason to describe President Scheinbaum in that sense. And if you want to pull something up, just because there's nothing new under the sun in this sense with anti-Semitism, because so much of anti-Semitism just recycles, fitting itself into whatever the contemporary circumstances may be. Isn't that from 1938? There was a particularly bitter gubernatorial race in Minnesota between then Senator Benson and Harold Stassen, who would become the boy wonder governor of Minnesota. And forces opposed to Elmer Benson, who had a Jewish wife, by the way, circulated this cartoon, 3 Jehu, Jehu. Well, it doesn't take much imagination to figure out the point that was being made in 1938, that Elmer Benson, according to this cartoon, was in the thrall of his Jewish advisors, Rutzik, Harris, and Jacobs at the time. My point being that whatever it is that Representative Nico Rios said, and I've never met the gentleman before. I hope to meet him at some point and we can have an informed, intelligent conversation. This is something that we see all the time, going back years and years and years and decades in history, where Benson is being said to be in the thrall of Jews or to be Jehu drivers. It has nothing to do with the merits of political issues facing Minnesota in 1938. It has nothing to do with the political issues facing North Dakota and the United States in 2025, which just cast aspersions and call people Jew. That's anti-Semitic, as I said before, unnecessary, ugly, and it's something that we must address. And again, Rob, thank you for dedicating a column to the issue.
Steve, this is nothing new for Representative Rios to say completely derogatory things about groups of people. And frankly, I'm frustrated that Representative Rios is still sitting in the state capitol and part of the Republican caucus, because I don't think most normal Democrats, Republicans, independents accept this kind of thing. I mean, this is just unacceptable. It makes my state that I love look very, very bad. And it frustrates me. He responded to these columns by saying, well, she is a Jew and it was a joke, and Democrats don't get jokes because Democrats want to cut off the genitals of toddlers. This is crazy stuff, right? This is crazy stuff. But there have been no repercussions for Representative Rios in the past. How do we get people to understand that we can't have these kind of comments in the public by our elected officials, that we can't elect people like this? It feels like he just gets to do this. He's happy right now we're talking about him. And that's sort of the world we live in. So what would you say to that?
It's a good question, Chad. And immunity and impunity come to mind, because we live now in an age where people can say practically anything without any consequences. Rob, you mentioned before, people are entitled to their their First Amendment rights, but they're not entitled to an audience, right? Well, the analog to that is, as a member of the North Dakota legislature, a body with a proud history, sure, you can say what it is that you want, but there should be electoral consequences to it, because that gentleman, and again, I'd like to meet him. I've never had a chance to meet him. I don't want to judge him necessarily based on one thing he says, but apparently there's a pattern, as Chad is pointing out, and I've read. You would think that somebody would address it and say, this may not be the highest and best place for you in the North Dakota legislature. So what you're doing, Chad, and what you're doing, Rob, is critically important. It should be part of the public discourse. Chad, you also point out something, though, that's really key. There are many people who say, as long as you're talking about me, it's a good day, no matter what it is. And so that's the rub of the situation, is when people are saying outlandish, outrageous things and we're paying attention to them, it often satisfies some urge and also puts them front page, so to speak. So how you reconcile those two political consequences for awful speech, yet not giving the person the attention that they want, is not easy. But I suppose if one is, looking at it from a North Dakota perspective, perhaps there's a better place for Representative Rios to serve than in the North Dakota legislature. But that's a decision for the voters of his district to make. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be, just to give some appropriate context, Representative Rios has not been on the ballot since these stories have broken. So the voters could recall him. I mean, that exists under the law. And at one point, when he had the previous altercation, when he got arrested for DUI, and he was using homophobic slurs, he was making racist comments about immigrants and refugees. There was, I guess, stirrings of a potential recall campaign, but nothing came of it. There are steps that could be taken in the legislature. He could be stripped of committee assignments. He could be removed from the Republican caucus. He could even be expelled, although that's happened once before in state history, not that long ago, as a result of some of my reporting into former Representative Luke Simons. One of the things, Steve, is how, because I think it joins with what you're talking about. We seem to live in an age where people could say things and they get away with it. And there's not, I would argue that not that long ago, somebody who did things that were said wildly anti-Semitic things, there was a time not that long ago where there would have been real electoral consequences. And I'm not sure we're living in that time right now. And I'm really scared because a lot of this was mainstream. I started talking about, a situation that I'm dealing with now. And when I went looking for some information of, where this person may have put some of my personal information online, I ended up at websites like BitChute. And in order to watch some of the anti-Semitic, diatribes, I first sat through an ad for ivermectin by former Congressman Matt Gaetz. And then I sat through the son of the president, Donald Trump Jr., promoting his podcast. And then we got to the anti-Semitic content. And so that's what really scares me, Steve, is the degree to which this stuff is becoming mainstream and endorsed and just normal and accepted.
Let me give you some statistics to underscore your point, or as parallel to the points that you're making. One, since this October 7th, the Hamas terrorist attacks on Israel, ADL has found that anti-Semitic incidents have risen 360% in the United States. FBI, they have a little different way of categorizing, generally by the statistics that they keep, rose 63%. That was information that they released on September 24th. So since 2023 over 2024, ADL, in its global assessment, found that 46% of adults worldwide hold significant anti-Semitic beliefs. And then campus-wise, Hillel and ADL just released, like last week, statistics about what Jewish students on campuses are facing. It says 83% of Jewish United States students have experienced or witnessed anti-Semitism since 10/7 on their campuses. To say the least, those are sobering numbers. And, to connect it to, Representative Rio says, oh, it's, as you say, it's a joke. I'm not meaning it. Everybody take a deep breath, chill pill, whatever it is. But the danger of it is it plays into a zeitgeist, the climate that we're seeing. But you ask, Rob and Chad are asking a good question. What do we do about it? Right. Well, I think it's an old sort of expression, but it's true. Try to have good speech, drive out bad speech too. Right. I mean, that's sort of the essence of our First Amendment is not censorious behavior, but let's add to the public good by what it is that we do. Our organization, that's something that we try to do. And I'll get personal for a minute, and maybe you should know my grandma, Marion Manya, as she's referred to in the Adriatic, came over in 1921 from first Poland via England and Southampton. And where did she find a home? In Fargo. Where did she find a home? In the Fargo Public Schools. Agassiz High School is where she graduated. I have her report cards. And what Fargo and Agassiz did for her, a little Jewish girl from a large family, fleeing pogroms and starvation and the brutality of the end of the First World War, and found a home in Fargo. And that's really an important American story, and you can multiply that hundreds of thousands and millions of times to people of all religions and ethnicities in the United States. But that's my grandma's story and how she found a home in Fargo. But my Grandpa Sam also spent time in Fargo. So this city and this state means a lot to our family. It's a nice story to tell, right? When we're hearing all sorts of opposition to immigration and anti-Semitism and racism and what you have. And let's remember our roots. And in my family, our roots run through Fargo, North Dakota. And the opportunity, and particularly in my grandmother's case, to receive a public education, learn English, came from a home where they spoke Yiddish, right? And what a transformation that was in her life. I want to pull up something else too, talking about the importance of programming and teaching. Williston, of course, way out in northwestern North Dakota. I don't have to tell anybody on this show, but you can pull up the picture of, we have a relationship with Williston High School over the years, and had a chance to bring Nick Winton. Nick Winton's father was Sir Nicholas Winton. There it is on the left side, right? He tells a story of his dad who saved 686 Czechoslovakian Jewish kids by the Kindertransport through just his own means, right at the edge of World War II. Point was, we had an opportunity with the Williston community, and then with the Williston High School, you can see all the kids in the class. It's not the world's greatest picture. I took it necessarily. Nick is there, and that's, again, the son of Sir Nicholas. When, if you can see it, it's almost impossible to see here, but it's actually from when Sir Nicholas was on British television, and they surprised him by bringing out many of the people who were just children who he helped save. You can see the movie One Life, which dramatizes all the things that Nick Winton did, Sir Nicholas, including appearing on this television show. But the point being, bringing information to people, programming in Williston, North Dakota, how wonderful that was. A kind of funny side note, the son, Nick, or Nicky as he likes to be called, what did he want to see most in life? He wanted to see bison. So that was no problem in Williston, North Dakota. So we went to Theodore Roosevelt National Park, and he saw the bison he could possibly want in November 2022. What a wonderful experience. It also shows a great story. On the right side, this is from Holocaust Memorial Month, April. I think it was April 2016. You see General Dorman, the immediate past, the Adjutant General of the North Dakota National Guard, General Johnson's predecessor. And we have a long-standing relationship with Bismarck State College, as well as the North Dakota National Guard, about commemorating the Holocaust. And that gentleman right there is Bob Bain. Bob was a member of the 89th Infantry Division, crossed the Ryan in plywood-bottom boats under intense fire, and fought all his way to the end of the war. Well, Mr. Bain was there when the 89th Infantry Division helped liberate, I'll put that in quotation marks, the Ohrdruf concentration camp, which was the first concentration camp discovered by American troops. And he was so proud to participate in this event, and that's why we call him a liberator. And these are the people that we have to remember in history. I looked this up yesterday. There's about 60,000 surviving veterans of the Second World War out of 16,300,000 that served in our country. There aren't many left. Bob passed away a few years ago. But as we're thinking about our country, let's think about our past and the greatest generation and what those folks did. So we have all the freedoms that we have today, including the First Amendment freedoms, which we're talking about on this show. And then just go ahead. I'm sorry, Chad.
Oh, Steve, thank you for sharing those stories. They're wonderful, and I hope that listeners can see those pictures. But I want to pull back a little bit. We've been talking quite a bit about Nico Rios and sort of the far right anti-Semitism. But this isn't something that just the far right has an issue with. I think we've seen over the last several years, my friends on the far left have been showing some really, really ugly things as well. Not in North Dakota, more nationally, but can you talk a little bit about how this isn't just like one party or one segment of a party who is doing this stuff?
Thank you, Chad. It's a great segue to an important point. And that is sort of a horseshoe theory of anti-Semitism, right? Where the far left and the far right meet is us and the hatred of Jews. Okay. Generally on the far right, it's conspiracy theories, and maybe Representative Rios is trafficking in that to some extent. On the far left is generally intense hatred of Israel, right? And, you see it any number of places. People, maybe it was Rob or Chad or both of you, making the point that things that once people would not say in public, people now feel, quote, liberated to say. And you can't imagine. Thankfully, it appears that the campuses in North Dakota have been far quieter, but at the University of Minnesota, demonstrations, vandalism, saying things like death to Israel, death to Zionists, right? Glory to the resistance, in other words, October 7th, right? Uplifting, so to speak, terrorists, idolizing them, right? All of this is blood curdling in that sense, right? One can have deep divisions about conduct of Israel. All you have to do is read the Israeli press every day, right? But not engage, not descend into pure Jew hatred and wishing for the destruction of Israel, and it's very corrosive of our public discourse. And you talked about the statistic, or I talked about the statistic about 83% of Jewish kids on American campuses facing anti-Semitism of one sort or another. Well, the high percentage of that is related to Israel, right? Rabbi Sachs, late chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, a prolific author, brilliant man, deeply knowledgeable, but he also had the genius of sort of reducing complicated subjects to their essence. And he used to say, anti-Semitism, why anti-Semitism after all these years? He used to say, anti-Semitism first was about Jews and the way they viewed God as people who were monotheists. Then Jews were hated for their race, or the awful race theories of Nazism and white supremacy of that time. And then Jews are hated for their state, Israel. So it morphs into different pieces, but so much of anti-Semitism has long-standing staying power in classic anti-Semitic tropes, conspiracy theories, or now hatred of Israel. But it's all of our responsibility to address these. It's significantly part of our work. But I want to say, and I'm conscious of time too, that our work, JCRC's work, is far more characterized, I'll use a fancy term, philo-Semitism. That is, people who want to partner with the Jewish community, work with the Jewish community, and vice versa too. A good example of that is, don't have to pull up the picture, is our democracy project with Concordia College, such an intellectual leader in the Red River Valley. And what we did with Malice Towards None, with Concordia College, and with Senator Heitkamp and Governor Schaefer, bringing together Republican and Democrat to talk about this very issue. And that is elevating the public discourse, because we all have a stake in it. And it was a very successful event. And it's something that you can find online, and hopefully will have some staying power. To my dear friend Michael Chan from Concordia, and their Center for Religion and Faith, where it was an important part of that work. And again, Senator Heitkamp and Governor Schaefer, former President Bill Kraft, and current President Irvin, too, all part of it.
Well, that's certainly something I think that is important, in that, you share, obviously you have a Jewish heritage that's unique to you, and you shared the story of your family coming over. And I think that's an important part of it, is getting to meet each other and know each other, and understanding, sure, the ways that we're different, and the ways that your journey and how you and your people ended up in America is different than mine, but also ways in which it's the same. My family immigrated to North Dakota from Norway. In fact, in North Dakota, it's not exactly seen as a hotbed of diversity, but you got to realize that the oldest mosque built in the United States was built in Western North Dakota. So their Muslim people have a heritage here as well. And we all came here from somewhere else. We all have unique stories, but in a lot of ways, they're not that unique. In a lot of ways, they're very similar. And we should celebrate. We're all just people at the end of the day. And, some people are bad people, and most people are good people. And that's all it is. It's just, and you're right, though. I think a lot of this is just very old tropes. You drill down on some of the rhetoric now, and you find the same old things about blood libel. You find the same old things about international conspiracies and people controlling certain things. They never seem to go away. And I guess the only thing, not wanting to dismiss, its relevance as pernicious and persistent slurs on Jewish people, but also recognizing that they're handy political tools for people who can't win their arguments through logic and reason. So, why are we struggling economically? Well, there's not a simple answer is, let's scapegoat somebody who's different from us. And certainly the Jewish people aren't unique in being scapegoated in that way. So it's just, I don't know. It's ugly. And I don't know. I don't even know what I'm trying to say because it's such an ugly, stupid thing. And a lot of times I look at it and I look at the people and like, you seem like an intelligent person. How can you be convinced by this? How can you be taken up by this? And yet it happens over and over again. And right now, it feels like it cycles up, but it cycles down. And right now we're very much in an up cycle.
Oh,
And
that's true.
it's a difficult thing to grapple with because sometimes, I mean, I love, I like history, and you read about some of the things that happened in, even in America, Charles Lindbergh and the America First movement of that time and Henry Ford. And you think, well, we're past that now, except we never really are.
And the means of disseminating information are even more personal and broad. You talk about the Lindbergh speech of September 11, 1941, to probably the most anti-Semitic speech ever given by a prominent American person to millions of people over national radio and given in Des Moines. But yes, that was the danger of that time. If you pull up, because it's such a good story, because this was at the 50th anniversary of the Nostra Aetate, which was the Vatican document that theologically reset relations between Catholics and Jews, hugely important in combating anti-Semitism. We commemorated in Fargo with Bishop Volda coming to the synagogue and participating in the service on a Shabbat, on a Saturday, on a Sabbath, to commemorate the importance of the Nostra Aetate. And that was 10 years ago, and we're starting another cycle of commemoration. But to have been in the synagogue with the bishop and to hear his words addressing the Jewish community was a wonderful moment, a passionate moment, and something that's important for the life of this community and all communities. The point is, we can all change. We can all address the past. We can look to the future, especially if we absorb the lessons of the past. And that's sort of the secret of the strength of the Nostra Aetate and the Protestant analogs to it is exploration and coming to grips with, say, embedded theological anti-Semitism and going beyond it, right? And something that we can all do. And I'm just out of that moment that we had in Fargo.
I think it highlights the importance.
Bethel.
Yeah, I think it highlights the importance of works that your group does and everything, because it's easy to think, we beat the Nazis, so it's over. We don't have to worry about that anymore. But it's not true. We always have to worry about it. We always have to work on the bonds that tie us all together. We all have to work on being good neighbors all the time. That work is never done. Steve, I thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, gentlemen.
This episode is presented by Dakota Resource Council. For nearly 50 years, DRC has worked across North Dakota to protect our land, water, and future.
Dakota Resource Council has definitely been shaping policy at the local, state, national levels. What role does DRC play in shaping that policy?
The industry is talking to people one at a time, and what DRC does is organize local groups and listen to people, and our voices are heard.
Become a member, volunteer, and take action, or donate today at drcinfo.org.
All right, welcome to the second half of Plain Talk, and now we're going to be talking with Cody Schuler. He is with the ACLU of North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, right? I think
North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, but yeah, North Dakota.
Wyoming. I forgot I forgot the state. Weird that Wyoming's on. That's
Rob, our first guest, had 3 states. Now Cody's got 3 states. It's very confusing. We know the Dakotas are together.
Yeah. And to be clear, I'm focused on North Dakota. I am former resident of South Dakota, but don't go usually south much.
We don't like being lumped in with those hosers from the lesser Dakota.
Absolutely. We can argue about capital architecture. That's always a hot topic with my colleagues in South Dakota. But
I wanted to ask you a little bit, because there's a First Amendment issue over in Dickinson that has cropped up where they are really struggling with a person, and it's gotten a little personal for me because I wrote something about it. My headline was that you have a right to free speech, you don't have a right to an audience. And what it is this gentleman, he's getting up and he's making just wild anti-Semitic speeches during the public comment section of city meetings. And they're really struggling with what to do with this. Because on one hand, they want to protect the right for the public to come up and address, and they don't necessarily want to put a lot of guardrails on that. On the other hand, they also don't want their meetings to turn into a platform for this guy to talk about stuff that really doesn't have anything to do with city business. So there's and last night there was a situation. I guess he referenced me. I guess there's an effort out there on social media, whatever, where to kind of dox me or whatever. But I speak to that a little bit because that's something it's very local. I think we have local public officials whose hearts are in the right place on it that are really trying to balance this, as one of America's, preeminent First Amendment organizations. What do you do? I mean, this is a tough time right now.
Yeah.
Where people are saying some things, and also, Representative Nico Rios, we just talked about that in the first segment and some of his comments on X. We're living in a tough time now where people are saying some things that are really atrocious, and how we handle those things, from an official standpoint is tough.
Yeah, I think there's a struggle to balance our First Amendment rights and sort of the time that we're living in. We've experienced this a lot. Fargo has experienced this with public comment periods. We've also seen it now cropping up in Dickinson and other places in the state. There is a bill actually talking about which. It's specifically talking about public comment periods and the mandatory nature, or trying to make sure that they're mandated in different spaces. We have the town hall is the preeminent place, from the time of the founding of this country, where people can come and air their grievances, talk to their elected leaders, and should have that right. I mean, so you can call an elected leader, but sometimes that elected leader doesn't respond, right? And you can be able to go before the city commission or the county commission and express your views. And at the same time, business needs to be done. And the First Amendment does not protect us to just go hog wild, right? The old adage of not screaming fire in a crowded theater. And so when I think we come to this piece, Rob, we have to balance, and city leaders, elected officials in these meetings, they have every right to set the agenda and to set the parameters of public comment. That is not a breaking of First Amendment right, because there are so many places for individuals to express themselves. And so city leaders should be empowered to set the parameter. Fargo did a really great thing by keeping an open public period so people can come and talk about whatever is on their heart. There's a time limit. It's set at a certain time in the meeting. And then there's times to discuss things or for the public to be able to come forward specifically on agenda items, again, with time limits and time frames. And a chair still has, it is not infringing on somebody's right for a chair running a meeting to cut somebody off and to say, we're moving on to the next thing. I was just in a hearing this morning here at the Capitol where the chair said, I think we've gone off topic. Let's go back to whatever and move on. That is the chair's prerogative, and that is not a free speech violation. And so I think there's ways for us to do that and to balance that. And this individual can say or do or write whatever they want, publish what they want online, write their op-eds, and say what they want in the meetings within the guidelines that are set by your city leaders or the electeds who are in charge of those public meetings.
Cody, I think your organization is at a really unique time right now in North Dakota because of what we're seeing in terms of, I referred to it a couple of weeks ago as big government Republicans who want to control what I read. They want to control what I pray. They want to control in public buildings that what the religion is. Hell, they have a resolution that says Christianity is the religion of the land in North Dakota. Can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing this session in terms of, it really feels like there's a creep from the government into a lot of aspects of our lives, in libraries, in the 10 Commandment bills, those kind of things. Can you just talk, and I know that's a broad question, but it just feels like there's so many things where the government is creeping into our lives. That's your job, right? To protect our civil liberties. Can you talk about what you're seeing this session?
Yeah, I think more than any of the past sessions. I mean, last session, I think there was a lot of, we really focused, there were lots of anti-LGBTQ and other aspects of sort of quote unquote morality, and including books, et cetera. And so we saw a little bit of a preview of it. I think this time what we're seeing is a more overarching piece. So at the ACLU, we are nonpartisan and nonprofit. And so we are here to protect and defend and advance people's civil liberties. And as a part of that, what we're seeing in this legislative session is very much legislating or an attempt to legislate morality or guide rules. And I can really sum it up, and this isn't to go over attacking any one politician, but the minority leader last session, when asked, or I'm sorry, the majority leader in the House last session, when asked about that sort of balance of local control, it was around one of our book bills. The leader said, "I agree on local control as well, except for when local folks aren't doing their job." And so that was really an interesting moment to me. And that's more of a paraphrase than a quote, but it really did shed light on that there is an aspect of at this state level where we are trying, or where there are some who want to make sure that their religion or their views set a baseline for how we're functioning in our society. And that's really problematic because our laws need to work for everybody. And it is at a borderline, would say, or at a baseline, it's not respectful of basic civil society to not respect someone else, to say, well, it doesn't matter if you're Christian or not, but we're going to set the baseline as Christian. That is not a part of who we are. And I don't want to get into founding fathers and were we a Christian nation or not. Our laws, our court precedent, our Constitution all have established that. You and I have a right to coexist and to think and believe and act freely. And so it is disconcerting to have all of these bills, and it's probably taking up the most of my time this legislative session.
One thing that's cropped up recently, the Trump administration issued an executive order trying to end birthright citizenship, and immediately ended up in the courts. Now, our Attorney General Drew Wrigley has filed a brief in support of that executive order. Your organization has been critical of that. I have to admit, the birthright citizenship thing is something that's a little tough for me, because on one hand, I realize the only reason I'm a citizen of the United States is because I was born here. I never took a test. I never had to swear an oath or anything. I was born here. I was given a birth certificate. I'm an American. And the same is true of the people that we're talking about. I mean, their parents may have come here illegally, but they're here because they were born here. But on the other hand, I mean, it is hard. Our federal government has not been enforcing immigration laws. The border is a mess. Our policies are a mess. And I think I want immigration, but I want orderly immigration. And, it feels a little bit like cheating the system. But on the other hand, I don't think Trump's executive order, where he just, issues a executive fiat and just does it for us, I don't think that respects the balance of powers, the process at all. But tell us a little bit about that issue from the ACLU's perspective.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, the president's executive order, in the perspective of the ACLU and many other organizations, is unconstitutional. And the executive does not have the authority to do that or to alter that. So we'll let that play out in the courts. That's above my pay grade and a different department. But at the end of the day, the Constitution has placed birthright citizenship, and we can obviously even look at historical context as to why it's there and its role in the end of slavery. But it also has been pushing 200 years of being then the law of the land. And so we have been this is how we functioned, generations have. And if we want to change that, there are constitutional processes for that. There are legal processes. Immigration, Rob, has indeed been a mess. I think since I was a little kid, we've been talking about the need for immigration reform. I don't disagree at all, but this isn't the way to do it. We have ways to have serious adult conversations in this country, and to issue an executive order trying to alter the Constitution, not the way to do it. And I think that there's just a different process, but everything is so heightened and so hot right now that I don't even know if we can find the starting point.
So, Cody, two different issues I want to ask you about at the legislature, and I sort of alluded to one of them affecting schools, the 10 Commandments And if you can talk about a little bit about your opposition to that and where that is in the process. I think they're amending it and doing all kinds of things. And then there's also a bill that mandates the Pledge of Allegiance that's said in schools. Schools already have the ability, if they want to do the pledge without mandating it from the state. Can you talk about your concerns with, and by the way, the Pledge of the Allegiance, I'm all for it, but I think forcing people to be patriotic is about the least patriotic thing that you can ever hear. So can you talk about those two things and sort of how you guys are feeling?
Yeah, well, I'll start with the Ten Commandments because that was sort of where we started this session right out of the gate, and that is that it is already is in law that schools already at a local level can make a decision whether to hang the Ten Commandments or not as a part of a historical display. And I think that the issue that we're having this legislative session is that the argument that's being made is sort of speaking the bill sponsors and a number of the proponents of that are sort of speaking out of both sides of their mouth. On one hand, they are saying that the Supreme Court, with what's called the Lemon Test, we don't have time to get into that, but with some of the recent changes at the Supreme Court level, that this historical document, the Ten Commandments, we're freed up now, more freed up than we were in the past, to be able to hang that in a classroom and not infringe on people's rights of religion. But at the same time, wanting to place it there as a historical document and have that mandate, and we won't get into the amendments or anything and where that's at, but at the bill as it was sponsored, to put that in the classroom every day as a historical document. But then the argument that's being made in as it works through committee and to gather votes around this is that we have an obligation under the North Dakota Constitution to be teaching a base level of morality. And so is it a historical document or is it a moral document? You can't have it both ways to protect it under the law, because it becomes establishment of religion if we're going to talk about it as a moral document.
To me, it becomes a problem. I don't have a problem with it being taught as a historic document. I don't have a problem talking about its influence on our laws and the people who founded our country and everything else. That's
100%.
My problem is when we take it out of the textbook and we slap it up on the wall as a statement of a moral statement, which not everybody subscribes to, which by the way brings us to another topic where Representative Rios has a resolution. Now granted, it's a resolution, so it's not a law. It's more of just, I guess, an expression of it's a position statement, I guess. But it expresses the sense of the state of North Dakota that Christ is king over the whole world, which is certainly something that Christians believe, and not something that our Jewish friends or our Hindu friends or our Muslim friends or our atheist friends believe. But I don't understand, like, that it seems to be very clear. The North Dakota Constitution, the United States Constitution, says pretty explicitly we're not to elevate other religions over the others. So I'm always fine with including religion in the public space. It's part of who people are. When people are in the public space, they bring it with them. But this idea that we're just going to elevate these things, I mean, they're blatantly unconstitutional. Although I think they serve a political purpose. I think they know the resolution's going to fail. I think they know the Ten Commandments thing's going to fail. What those things are going to end up are in mailers come election time, where they can accuse incumbents who voted against them of being anti-Christian. I think that's the political purpose of these things.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree, Rob, and I would say that with that in particular, the resolution, Representative Rios's resolution, what we're seeing is we're just seeing a larger cadre. To Chad's point about what we're seeing, asking about this in the tenor of the whole session, we see this sort of package of legislation, and it all sort of has a common thread of a Christian national. We're making decisions about everything from bathrooms and who can go to the bathroom where, et cetera, revisiting that from last session, all of them with lots of religious arguments behind them in making these laws. And so therefore, clearly, there's a Christian nationalism slant. And I would say to that point, Rob, it is, I think, a little bit of a religious test. I think that's part of the purpose of it. But here's what I would say. It's a resolution. It would not be binding by law. Question as to whether it would violate the establishment clause of the Constitution or not. Okay, again, that's above my pay grade. But at the end of the day, any individual who votes for or supports this law is saying publicly by casting their vote that they are interested in a Christian nationalist agenda. And so I think it works both ways. I think that there are lawmakers who don't vote for it are going to be accused of being anti-Christian, but it also is going to make it very clear to us as to who feel so strongly to vote for something as such, and to force that on other people, even if it's not a binding law. They're making a statement that they wish it was.
Yeah. I think it's also interesting how, like, the Ten Commandments conversation, it takes us away from real conversations about behavioral health and issues going on in our schools, because some of these folks are just saying, hey, if we have issues in our school, let's simply slap this poster of the Ten Commandments on the wall, and then little Johnny's going to stop smacking his teacher in the face. It's a small-minded sort of not really solving big problems. And that was one of my frustrations listening to that hearing. But shifting to another issue that you're working on, Representative Murphy has a bill that would make abortion legal in some circumstances in North Dakota. Meanwhile, there's a pretty big court case that's going through as well. Can you talk about sort of where abortion is at in this session? I mean, we're all a month in, Cody, and we haven't even talked about abortion much yet. What's going on?
I know it's like the Twilight Zone. So the ACLU, we do not believe that the legislature should pass any laws around abortion, even laws that we would support, while this court case is still pending. And so I think the legislature needs to respond. And I know that's a struggle because it's every 2-year session, and that's part of Representative Murphy's concern. We can't wait until the next session. But I think that it would be irresponsible for this session to act without getting the word from the court to be able to provide some guidance as to where to go next, right? They need to respond to that. Second of all, the ACLU is opposed to any time we put a ban on abortion. And regardless of this, I love that Representative Murphy is trying to seek a middle ground and have a good adult conversation around and finding common ground around this strained issue. But it's still a ban. I think that it has many problems in it, and what kind of restrictions are. And I don't think that it solves the problem. And I don't think it solves the problem until, again, that we know what the court's going to say. So we will be opposing it just on those reasons. And but I do applaud Representative Murphy for wanting to carve out that space. And however, I don't think that we start that conversation with the session start, just in the same way that I hate legislators and lobbyists like myself. We hate when we start having the conversation in November, December about things. We need to start having this conversation months and months ahead of time, and not wait until now to do it. So if we're going to find a better way, then we also need to move the timetable back.
I will say that one of my great frustrations with organizations like the ACLU, and maybe it's not fair because you're a bunch of lawyers, is that you want to settle everything in the courts. Where I think it's been, I mean, for people who want legal access to abortion, I think it's been a terrible mistake, and you folks are now reaping the whirlwind with the courts having struck down the precedents. The courts gave, and now they're taken away. I think the focus should have been on building political consensus around middle ground, which frustrates me a little bit to hear that you're opposed. I mean, I understand that you're kind of opposed on timing, maybe more so than anything else, but it's frustrating to me because I look at Representative Murphy's bill as a good faith effort to find middle ground, because the way the courts have left things now, and I think the North Dakota Supreme Court is absolutely going to uphold that law. If you read I had a column about this, you read the tea leaves, they're going to uphold it. We know where that wind's blowing. We got to find middle ground, and groups like yours are going to have to start defining what is your position on abortion. Because right now you're saying you oppose any restriction. What does that mean? Right up to the due date? What does that mean?
Yeah. So, well, we could get into the nuances of that, but Rob, I can't disagree with you. I think that you're exactly right. We have relied upon the courts, and I think that's been the ACLU's reputation. Our online store sells lots of we'll see you in court T-shirts. I've used that phrase more than once as well. But I think you also have to understand, and maybe it's just something we haven't seen here. I'd like I'm so glad that you asked this or mentioned this, because there has been a shift at the ACLU, particularly even before the first Trump administration, but even definitely after 2016, in balancing out the ACLU's mission between the high emphasis of what we do in the courts and what we do on the advocacy side. Right here in ACLU of North Dakota, for instance, I'm not an attorney. I do not make decisions about court cases. I do not spend my time. I don't have any power in that area. When people come and talk to me about stuff, I had somebody bring a lawsuit idea to me yesterday in the cafeteria at the Capitol. And I'm like, well, I'll send an email over to legal. That's you. But at the end of the day, we are trying to balance that out, to say, like, we have an advocacy role. We want to, in fact, the foundations of the ACLU back in 1920 really was on an advocacy. And we always joke that the largest budget item at the ACLU in its founding in those early years was a line item called propaganda. And it was what it meant. It was advocacy work. It was getting the messages out about civil liberties.
Bad
And so
term, though.
we're
Bad
trying.
term.
Yeah.
Bad term for it, though.
Yeah,
Cody-
I think vocab meant something different then, but we're trying to do that, Rob. And so I'd love to continue to talk to you about that another time, about those
Yeah.
efforts, because it's not just about the courts anymore.
Well, we're out of time now. Really appreciate you coming on, Cody.
I appreciate it as well. I'm happy to come on and chat anytime.
Thanks, Cody.
That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening. We don't like being humped in or lumped in with those hosers from the lesser Dakota.